Cool, thank you. Move on to the next one. 11. We have Dave, Sam, and Imogen. Kia ora. I'll just move this, and I think the Mayor was keen to second. And I've added, and sorry I didn't get a chance to send it around, but I think most people will be okay with it. Just added a D, which is endorse the Mayor and Chair of the Policy and Planning Committee, writing to the Minister for Conservation requesting central government funding contributions are secured for the Auckland Regional Pest Management Programs, Tairatu Mai Tonga, Kawo Predator Eradication, Te Kurawai Waiheke, and Poipoia Te Kākono, which is the kaipara work to ensure project outcomes are achieved over the applicable timeframes for each project. And I can go into that more. We've put that is in the submission, but I just wanted to accentuate that because we have concerns that now Predator 2050s and Jobs for Nature are being wound up, that actually all those groups will be coming to us for that funding because these programs need to continue. Otherwise, the investment prior to that is a waste because the pests come back pretty quick when you stop doing the work. And we've had amazing outcomes already through those. So I can talk about it a bit more later, but I'm hoping people are fine with the D there. Obviously, debate if they are not. So, right, who are we going to first?
Greetings, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity again to provide a report to you which encompasses proposed Auckland Council views on the refresh of this Predator-Free 2050 strategy. This is the second, or this refresh follows the first strategy that was produced about 5 years ago, so it just has a 5-year window of review, and we're looking to provide this advice through to the delegated authorisers following resolution today for comment. So if I just firstly introduce the team on the front desk here today. I've got Sam Anwar, and he's a Principal Analyst, Natural Environment Strategy with me. He's in our team. And I've also got Dr. Imogen Bassett, who's from Environmental Services, and of course Dave Allen, Manager, Natural Environment Strategy within Policy. So, as the Chair just noted, the recommendations today have been extended to include a D. The key point here is that we're looking to provide the Council's response to this particular central government review and get that delegated to decision makers before we have to submit this by the 30th of June. I'll hand over to Sam.
Good morning, members. Just before I go into the details of the consultation, I thought it would be useful just to provide an overview and the timelines. As Dave mentioned earlier, the purpose of this report is to provide a submission to Department of Conservation on their consultation of predator-free strategy, 2050 strategy towards a predator-free New Zealand. This is an update to an existing strategy that was published in 2020. The consultation opened on the 5th of May and the closing is on the 30th of June. We anticipate the department anticipates that the consultation paper, the proposals will be approved by the end of the year. One of the things that happened during the consultation period was the Budget 2025 happened, where a Predator-Free 2050 Limited was disestablished through that process, and there's no mention of that disestablishment through this paper itself. I'll just talk very briefly about Predator-Free 2050 consultation paper. It continues the existing approach and has 4 focus areas, which is mobilise for action to inspire New Zealanders and empower communities to take action. It also, the next focus areas is to maintain the gains, which is to continue essential predator control in the region. The third focus area is about innovation for eradication, which is to use advanced tools around tools and techniques to effectively eradicate some of the pests in there. And the fourth focus area is to prepare for accelerate, is to develop a clear evidence-based plan to achieve the 2050 goals. Our draft submission is overall supportive of the proposals within the discussion as it continues some of the existing approach. And our submission provides some detailed feedback on those four focus areas. There are a number of key areas that we do have concerns around, and one of those is that it seems that the proposal seems to be in isolation and don't take into account some of the broader issues that are happening. For example, our reform of the resource management system. We did undertake a high-level assessment of the proposals of the document, and in most instances it seems to be aligned with what we're seeking to achieve. There are some of the goals are quite ambitious, in particular around community participation as being one of those. It's seeking to increase participation by 25% based on a 2025 baseline. So that's quite an ambition for us, as we're actually achieving that already. So increasing that will be quite hard for the council. The discussion paper also highlights at the end of the paper about increasing the target species from the 7 mammalian current species to include 10. It proposes that this expansion doesn't happen because there's quite a lot of issues already around there. But there is a kind of long-standing issue around feral cats, and they kind of suggest that we kind of don't do that at this point in time. But we do think that the central government does have some roles in this. I'd like to talk very quickly about the disestablishment of Predator-Free 2050 Limited. I won't read the slide. These are presented in the report itself. Some of the key issues around the risks that remain are there, and those are presented in the report as well. We also provided a bit of a high-level summary about the financial implications around the disestablishment of Predator-Free 2050 Limited. These are presented in the table. As we can kind of see in general, that the funding from the level of funding for each program is varied, and the proportion of council funding varies depending on the individual project. And the Predator-Free funding that's not from council comes from a variety of sources, including Jobs for Nature and Department of Conservation and Foundation North, for example, as some of those ones. And there are some issues around the ongoing funding beyond 2027.
Just to sum up, the strategy itself is not presenting significant issues for this council. It's a national set of goals. Generally, we are consistent with it. There are a couple of observations this council can make in its submission that just highlight a few things. There's a couple of things I wanted to just highlight in the case of the Hauraki Golf areas. I did receive some advice yesterday from Izzy, so we can build in a paragraph that sort of boosts the commentary around pest-free island status of the Gulf. So just to acknowledge that for Councillor Lee. And then I guess the other one I wanted to note was the Kaipara work. We're just going to make a particular mention of that as well. So there's a number of activities that we're doing across the council that we want to just highlight, and also for our Hukura members, just an observation about the first goal talks about mobilisation, and it has a goals about for Maori, and I think what we will need to do in our submission is possibly to put in a sentence there about treaty settlements, just sort of very mindful of our Waitakere Ranges area and how that's managed and what might be the expectations, the aspirations for the interests in that area. So just an observation there. And we just don't do it explicitly enough in our draft at the moment. So I think there's a couple of tweaks that I expect we'll work through with the delegated authorisers just to cover those issues off. And the observations about the disestablishment of predator-free are sort of really for information purposes for this discussion. And as the Chair's noted, it's an additional matter that can be usefully canvassed through a correspondence with the Minister of Conservation. And I'll leave that perhaps to Richard to round off, but that's our presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to be clear, this is not the submission isn't actually on the disestablishment. We can obviously note our concerns, but that was decided on the day, and I have confirmed through staff that we were not notified. It was in the budget documents. Sadly, not even the CEO was notified until it was in the budget documents. So that's pretty tough. So that has been disestablished. The rest of the review, although connected, so we're trying to give both points our dissatisfaction over the disestablishment, but also saying, well, this is actually a good plan, but whether we note that there can be a contradiction. Just on a question, and maybe it's for Imogen or anyone, but could you just explain to the committee who may not know, the tūmai tonga we have presented at this committee before, but I guess all of them, what are the outcomes beyond just, pest eradication, biodiversity is amazing, but what has been actually the investment impacts for the island, for that community? It's broader than just pest eradication, which is, of course, very important. But
Kia ora, yeah, I think absolutely. This is a prime example of where we see social outcomes really intertwined with biodiversity outcomes. So a huge amount of employment raising, so a real ability for mana whenua there to be able to bring people home, to actually be able to work on island. I think the long-term trajectory is for that to really increase. The tourism, biodiversity, infrastructure opportunities associated with that are huge as well. And a real enabling of fulfilling of treaty obligations and Ngāti Rūhua, Ngāti Wai, Kia Aotea being able to actually, have the capacity to really give effect to that relationship with the whenua there.
And because the budget potential uncertainty, do you believe that with our tight budgets, we're going to be able to continue those programs? I mean, Councillor Lee and I were on Waiheke a few weeks ago because we've amazingly introduced Kiwi onto the island, but this could only have been possible with this partnership between Council, mana whenua, DOC, the Community Predator 2050. Is that, what happens going forward?
Yeah, I think as you mentioned earlier, pests do revert very rapidly if you take your foot off the pedal. Council has never committed to funding the totality of any of these projects, so their continuation is heavily reliant on external funding sources. We are, for example, in the Kawo project, we're working really effectively with the New Zealand Nature Fund to be able to bring in non-rates, non-crown revenue to support that, but I think the reality is that that's never going to be able to fulfil all of that. So I think there is a significant risk to some of these projects if we don't have continuation of significant contributions from other parties, particularly Crown.
Kia ora. Thank you very much. Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you, Chair, and to a degree, Imogen has probably responded in part, but may I say that I welcome the D that you have, and I've just had some concern that we haven't had in the presentation sufficient response on the loss of sponsorship and partnership funding, which is what Predator 2050 was all about. What further ramifications might occur, could the officers speak to, with the change, which seems very short-sighted from my perspective, for cutting some administrative costs, we are going to potentially forego a lot of philanthropic and sponsorship and partnership funding into the future. What might that be if we're looking at the LTP for next year? What would the challenge be?
Through the chair, I think absolutely the challenge with these kind of eradication type projects is that they do require a continuity of funding. You can't sort of stop and start it, otherwise there is a really significant challenge there. I think we did always know that some of the major Crown contributions were time bounded, and so that uncertainty has always been there. It is absolutely true that there is increased uncertainty there, and I think it's very difficult to really answer Councillor Fletcher's question with certainty, but it is something we're going to have to think about really carefully in terms of what council can provide and how we can partner with other organisations effectively. I think you know, it's the administrative elements of predator-free. There may or may not be an argument for shifting them into the Department of Conservation, but it's certainly unclear from what we're hearing from government at the moment whether the department will actually be in any position to be able to resource this, and we know that they're already incredibly stretched across the remainder of their work, so I think it's certainly concerning.
Can you pardon me, can you confirm that with that being transferred to the Department of Conservation, they are not equipped to be able to pursue some of those sponsorships as would a private entity or a Crown entity like Predator Free New Zealand? Can you just highlight where any obstacle might be in pursuing sponsorships going forward?
Through the chair, I mean, I don't feel that it's I'm in a position to really sort of comment on what funding processes the department might have within their system, but what I do think is it's very clear that they have some significant capacity challenges that would need to be worked through, and I think we're really waiting for some further clarification from central government about what the implications are.
Thank you, Chair, and I welcome the D that you have prepared, and I hope that we can expand on that in some way that really gives a better understanding of what the consequences of this decision might be.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher, and sorry to hear you're so unwell, but thank you for being here and for your comments on this over the last couple of weeks. We will make sure in the letter that we question the capability of DOC and ability, even as you say, for a Crown agency to do the type of, you know, philanthropic or business or whatever it is type fundraising that Predator 2050 set up by the John Key government was kind of, one of the purposes was to be able to get that additional boost of funding from others through that mechanism as opposed to through a Crown agency, which can be, as you say, much more difficult. So we'll ensure that's part of the letter, and we'll send it to you as well if you'd like to look at it.
Thank you, Chair. I won't speak to the item, but I just think we've lost that power of leverage, and it's very, very short-sighted.
Absolutely. Kia ora. Councillor Walker.
I've got a few questions. So, Predator Free 2050's Limited, it's a charitable Crown-owned company. So, in this instance, the Crown is the shareholder and I'm assuming also director. Is it conceivable that Auckland Council, together with other councils, could take on this company? I mean, that's just a matter of changing the shareholding and the directors and the like. Has that been considered?
So it hasn't been considered, and it's going through a disestablishment process. I think I just want to revert back to sort of the previous discussion we just had, which is about us approaching the Minister to really work out what might be the next steps in terms of how DOC administers things and what systems they might need to improve to still achieve the outcomes that we're seeking. Because at one level it's a change of the landlord, should we call it, looking after the task, and it's really about sort of how we then sort of still achieve some of the outcomes that are expected of that program that was in place. So I think it's probably the best bang for buck, Councillor Walker, there, is to sort of work with the Minister of Conservation to ascertain how we can see these programs advanced.
Okay, that doesn't really answer my question. So My question is about taking over the ownership of the company. I'm assuming the need still exists, that is to eliminate pests. I'm assuming that the area, which is New Zealand, which involves both the Crown and private property owners, iwi and the like, I'm assuming that all of those stakeholders still exist. So, given that you've got something set up, and given that councils may be a valid entity to take it on, why can't we consider that? There might be a number of councils that were interested in picking up on this, and other entities that could be shareholders.
Through the chair, I mean, yeah, it's not something that we've considered in the short time since this announcement. I think it's an interesting idea, which I can certainly feed back to Te Kahika, the Regional Council Collective, but there would obviously be a number of financial implications of it that would need to be worked through pretty carefully. And I think, as Dave mentioned, you know, in the first instance, we're just seeking further clarification from central government about what their intentions are at this point.
Well, I'm just putting to you that it's worth exploring. I don't know what capital there is in the company.
It's a saving of 3.6 million. So
I know,
yeah.
I understand there's a saving of 3.6 million. I mean, a company will have capital. It would be useful to know what the amount of capital is and whether the government might be interested in leaving some money in. I don't know. It seems pretty crazy to take something that I think Rob Fennick and others were involved in floating, a lot of good people, to trash it.
Yeah, I think, Councillor Walker, we could probably take this, probably for
there's a whole ecosystem around this.
I don't think we disagree with you at all, but the officers here probably couldn't comment. We would probably engage the Mayor with the conversation, but because the decision's already been made, voted on through Budget 2025, you know, governments don't have to consult on their budgets like ours, so it's already done. The decision's been made, and they've made that saving in their budget, 3.6 million, by disestablishing an agency. But I think you bring up a good point. What are the options to us ongoing? But for the officers here, it's not something. But in our letter and our conversation with the Minister, hopefully next week, maybe we could.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, none of that presupposes that there can't be a change in the shareholding. That's a pretty simple transaction. It's just a matter of councils like ours getting our act together.
Yeah, Councillor Lee.
Thank you. Can I just apologise? I misspoke during the previous item about submissions. They were in the attachment, but they're not in my hard copy. So please apologise to those ladies if you could. Thank you. In regard to the item here, we're talking about a submission. We should note that the Predator-Free Trust was established in 2013, and then the Prime Minister at the time, John Key, announced and established the Predator-Free New Zealand 2050 Limited, a company to achieve the visionary goal. So 10 years almost, and there's a significant amount of money being invested. But in terms of this council's role and this submission, I wonder if the council could use this opportunity to take a more of an audit approach on progress rather than being kind of tangled up, if you like, in the Hauraki Gulf. And I've had a message from the chair of the Aotea Great Barrier Local Board who wants more emphasis placed on the Hauraki Gulf, and I fully agree. And it's not just these groups that have been set up who do good work, provide employment and so on. It's the objective, isn't it? Eradication. Now, 10 years have gone by, and I don't think anywhere in any location there's been actual complete eradications. 10 years have gone by, and how much money? And therefore, I think the council needs to have a more of an audit oversight role. Here's the money, but that's one department. We are the hard-nosed auditors, and we're going to check on progress because we believe in this 2050 timeline, and 10 years has gone past, and there's a lot of emphasis on control. Control was not eradication. Control was actually culling, and it may actually help the survivors. And in that respect, the pest-free Carwell project is targeting wallabies and ship rats, Norway rats, mustelids. They're off the hook. Anyway, that's a different matter. My question is, in terms of this submission, do you think there is an opportunity for the council to take an oversight view, taking it very seriously, actually emphasising the Hauraki Gulf, because that's the best place to achieve eradications, islands, and take that approach? What's the officer's feeling on that?
Well, firstly, Auckland Council, through its departments, are involved with those projects and will have, the on-the-ground involvement as to how well it's going. In terms of a strategy document, maybe there's some points that could be made about how we can see some monitoring and performance measures introduced into the strategy so that you can actually make an assessment as to are we just controlling or are we eradicating. The other point is that we can certainly emphasise the desire to see achieving eradication goals more clearly expressed, so we can do that as well. So I think there's a number of ways we could tweak the submission that speak to the points you've raised, Councillor Lee. So I think that is possible. I think I'd also want to explore with the Department of Conservation, how are you measuring your performance currently yourselves? Because, like you're saying, there could be other parties who are putting in dollars that could, say, well, that's not necessarily the best contribution we've made, or we could do it better. So I think the points you raise are ones that we can sort of explore in the submission further.
And can I just add to that to say also, it is one of the things that's really pleasing to see in the consultation document is an emphasis on outcome monitoring. So that is to say, are we seeing biodiversity recovery as a result of all this pest control? And fundamentally, whether it's eradication or control, that's the thing that should be front and centre of our minds, is what are we trying to achieve. So, we support that as a thing to have more focus on from the government. And also we've been able to note our role in threatened species monitoring as well, as part of essentially that audit function, to be able to see what kind of trajectory are those outcome factors going in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. With those figures there, just on a rule of thumb percentage, how much gifting philanthropy does it attract? Of the values we're spending, are we getting 5% or 50%? Are we attracting of money being delivered by philanthropy? Because you said that was to try to make sure we had the ability to attract philanthropic money into the whole scheme, correct? That's what it says there on that little, for those little stars there.
What proportion is philanthropic?
Yeah.
Kia ora, through the chair. In the column where it says secured to 2027 non-council, so that left-hand side, we have a reasonably decent breakdown for two of the projects, that's Tūmatonga and the Kawe project. And so specifically in Tūmatonga, there's around $2.6 million that's come through Foundation North, so that's that philanthropic avenue. And for Kawe, we've been able to work with the New Zealand Nature Fund and set up a platform by which members of the community can donate to the project, and that has brought in just over $800,000 for that project as well. So that's, just under a third of the total
Okay,
secured
so in
outcome.
my sort of naivety, I sort of, so that I thought philanthropic was where someone with a pocket full of spare money gave us money, not where we went and made an application to Foundation North. Is that how that money comes?
So that's around, so we're not the project lead for Tū Mai Taonga, so, but as a project led by Mana Whenua, their application is to Foundation North, and we're a co-funding partner to that.
Okay, I would support Councillor Lee's position about let's try to make sure we use this to ignite a bit of an audit on everything, because I, for one, find it really hard to put together all the laminations of process, the layers of process that develop over a decade or so, you know. And when I was listening to your talk, I was thinking about, you know, the natural environment and targeted rate, the NETA rate. You know, we gave money towards the National Pest Management Strategy development. We had staff involved in all that sort of stuff. This is all sort of connected together. And then I was thinking about the fact that our ownership, we say we want to be spare of, you know, free of national government, decrees, and yet we seem to be really concerned about this thing coming to a halt. When we collect $32 million a year from the NETA, we've collected 199 since it was started. We've only spent 167. We've only spent 32 million on tracks. There's some big gaps left there, and so my question is: A, yes, I agree. Can we audit what we're doing, and can we not? Where can we take ownership of this ourselves, where we have more direction rather than worried about the government pulling out?
Can I just make some general observation? There is quite a lot of community support for some of these projects, and they do put in money. So just to be clear, it's not just through Foundation North or QE2 or other sorts of bodies. In the case of Kawau, for example, there's a lot of community money that's coming in. So, you know, there is partnerships that are forged across these different areas to help with getting the outcomes that are desired. There's more detail with these projects, of course, on websites and everything else. It will break that down. And there's a lot of operational staff involvement with the running of these projects as well. So there's an in for making sure that things are going okay. So I just wanted to express those 2 points, because at the moment we're sort of just presenting this in a bit of a hurry over the last 2 weeks because of the decision made to just establish predator-free. The other comment was that funding for this was only secured through till the end of financial year 27 from predator-free. So there will need to be some decisions about how any shortfall is made up, whether it's Auckland Council or other bodies. And so I guess the key thing is that's why it's important to have that resolution D to say we need to go to the Minister of Conservation and start to test some of these questions, very valid questions about how we should be involved more explicitly, perhaps.
Less vulnerable to these sorts of movements because the pests don't worry about us, you know, not having funding.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, and correct me if I'm wrong, these projects here, Councillor Turner, they're not on council land, and we actually haven't been the lead on these. We've been partnering, whereas NETA projects are usually and normally within council reserves or led by council. These ones are mostly on dock and private land, and we've been a great partner, but our concern is when the tide goes out, we become picking up the government responsibility. So it's a little bit different to wanting government to help us with our responsibilities. We obviously see the environment as all our responsibility, but I guess in this case we're highlighting the ones, and maybe if I'm on the wrong track, but these.
Yeah, and I'd just like to point out too, so the Auckland Council contribution there is largely natural environment targeted rate funding, so that targeted rate does contribute to these projects, but I think, as the Chair just noted, you know, they are projects which are in inhabited communities and really led by community enthusiasm, and so they're not something that Council seeks to do to the community, but rather to be supporting that community-led action, and we do provide that real technical advice as well as funding. But I think, you know, there would be a choice to us to become the primary sole funder, but we would have to provide a whole lot more money than we currently have in order to have that increased sort of role in steering it. And really, the success of these projects is heavily dependent on the social licence that comes from the community really wanting this, leading this, delivering it in a way which is acceptable to them within their spaces that they are living and working.
Thank you. So then I suppose I support Councillor Walker, because you've explained quite a lot of IP, in that organisation which is going to be shut down. And if we could simply advocate to take it over, or to share a different way of keeping it alive, we don't lose all the stuff you've just talked about. Thank you.
Yeah, so the first observation is that some of those staff are transferring across to DOC, so some of that expertise is not entirely lost. And again, this is a transitional issue that would be quite useful to engage the Minister and DOC staff about how they might run things in the future. So I think there's things that we can't answer here because we're in that very, interim spot at the moment, but I think there's a lot of discussion we will be wanting to have so that we can inform yourselves as to what level of stake you want to take in some of these projects into the future. So that would be probably a nice way to round off that discussion, recognising this is about us saying, do we believe the central government strategy review is on the right track, which is kind of the main point of getting this resolution today.
And I think if we were consulted before a decision was made, we could have had some of these more integral conversations before, but we know we weren't. Councillor Darby.
Thanks. I can understand our focus on projects. In terms of predator-free 2050 Limited, the company, and its disestablishment, what is your understanding of why it was disestablished other than financial? Did it fail to meet deliverables, key performance indicators, or anything like that?
Well, my understanding is that it's an entirely financial decision.
Sorry, I can't quite hear you.
Oh,
Just want to pull your mic closer to you.
Sorry, through the chair. My understanding is that it's an entirely financial decision. Yeah.
So it's entirely financial. They were delivering. My understanding is they were delivering as expected. And I think in terms of projects, they have, it's something like coming up to 1 million hectares of Aotearoa they've been operating in. Is that particularly in the mainland, South Island?
Yeah, I don't have the exact figure off the top of my head, but yes, there has been an enormous scaling up of activity. And I think, to your point about mentioning the focus on projects, it's also worth mentioning that across the country, this has really catalysed an energy within communities for conservation activity, which is not entirely constrained to these specifically funded projects. And so we're really seeing significant biodiversity gains and increases in the collective activity into the system through this movement.
In their short time, they've undertaken, and this is the big game-changing research that Predator-Free 2050 as a company is. It's a little bit under the radar. The projects are very visible. It's people in the field and communities and collaboration and philanthropy all coming together. But I have an awareness of the research programs, and there's more than maybe 15, I think, since 20 came into being. I'm really concerned about what's going to happen in that space. Can you elaborate? Do you have any understanding of what's going to happen in that space? And now, I know of a few of them in sort of DNA research and that sort of thing on possums. They are the big game changers. The future is not going to be labour in the field as it is now. So I'm really quite concerned about who's going to pick that up. And I can see that the Minister's saying that they're funded for now, but there's no commitment going forward. I'd like to know what your understanding is of this game-changing research.
And through the chair, I think you're absolutely right. That research function is really game changing. So we know that, for example, the components of the aspiration that really focus on large scale eradications within populated areas, those things are basically not technically feasible with our current tools. You know, in most urban situations, it's very, very tricky. So to really scale up to that national aspiration, we are absolutely needing some kind of additional breakthrough. There has been significant progress on a number of tools under that predator-free auspices over the last few years. I think it's very early days, and really my understanding is much like yours at the moment, that like the project work, the government has said that they will honour that work that's already contracted, but again we will be seeking further clarity about what the long-term plan is for the Crown to be supporting technological advances, and noting Crown Research Institutes are being restructured as well, and what the wider sort of implications are for the research community.
Okay, Chair, I'm just wondering whether, and last question for the staff, and I'll make some comment on this later too, but do we have our sort of Aotearoa hat on here in making our submission? Because this is like a national program, and it's the collaboration right across the motu on this that is the big thing and the big drive. It's philanthropy, as I mentioned, community collaboration, a lot of amazing inputs. And I would like us to submit extremely strongly on the success of Predator Free 2050 Limited, the company, and imprint on the government's mind that they are disestablishing, extinguishing, expunging an extremely successful body. Now, my question to you is, in our submission, do we actually put the big nation hat on in making our submission to really stress this is a mistake? This is an accountant's error in funding, and I believe it's just a
So we can certainly strengthen it, and yes, we have had the sort of Aotearoa New Zealand hat on in terms of responding to a national document, but I think that is something we can certainly emphasise in the value that the company has brought to research, technology, innovation, not just the projects, and it's also encompassed in the goals that they've actually set out, and so it's a good lever for us to say, yes, we really support the goal, because that means you're going to have to continue to commit to resourcing those kinds of functions, whether it's research, innovation, or whatever else. So we can certainly just amp that up a bit, just in terms of that particular point. There's already about 3 or 4 others that I've sort of mentioned before that I'm looking to probably see that we enhance in the submission.
With your willingness, Chair, the Deputy Chair, I think it's beholden on to us to really push this much harder.
Thank you, thank you, Councillor. Definitely, and that's why this was originally going to be a staff-led submission, but we asked for it to come here so we could have this conversation and debate. So we'll definitely ensure that before it goes out of our building, that it's fully strengthened in the way you say. So thank you, Member Henare.
Kia ora. Is the feral cat part of the 2050 strategy? Is there anything in there that attacks that problem?
Yeah, sorry, I have a hearing impairment, so sometimes I need help to interpret the question. Through the chair, so the strategy does consult on what the target species for predator-free should be. So the government has previously had some conversation about whether cats should be brought into that or not. In the consultation document that we're submitting on, they've proposed that cats should be excluded from the predator-free target list, as they currently are, so no change. What we've said in the draft submission is that we acknowledge that there may be that there are some valid rationales for why you would do that, in the sense that we know that when we call cats pests or targets, that sort of language, albeit when we're talking about feral animals, that it is can be quite damaging to social licence around them being able to manage them effectively. So acknowledging that that exists, but we have also in the submission suggested that that doesn't detract from the fact that the Crown has a significant role to play in cat management, both in terms of effective funding on Crown land, for example, with respect to Tūmaitaonga, where a large proportion of the land is Department of Conservation land, and so we suggested that they should be at the table, effectively resourcing management of feral cats as they would with other pressures on significant ecosystem land. And we've also suggested that there is a role for the government to play in terms of providing a cohesive, effective regulatory platform for cat management in general across the country.
And with respect to who pays for all of this? Is it? I heard Councillor Turner sort of, I think, tried to go down this road about costs. Wouldn't it be better if the Department of Conservation paid rates on their land? Then you could actually afford to put aside some quite some substantial money to pay for a lot of this stuff. You reckon?
Probably not my place to comment on it.
Thank you, Councillor. Member Hianere. That is the end of the questions. We'll go to debate now. So thank all of you for this work and trying to balance the actual submission, which is on the refresh, which is quite good, and also highlight our concerns around the disestablishment, which wasn't part of the review. A very strange course of events, but thank you for trying to bring us back to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I moved and the Mayor seconded. I think Councillor Darby would like to speak to this, did you? Yeah. Councillor Darby.
Yeah, I'm going to be making my annual pilgrimage to Field Days tomorrow, and one of the stands I always go to is the Predator-Free 2050 Limited stand, just to see what the new research is, and usually spend about an hour there having a chat. Yes, it's a passion of mine, a personal one, and I was involved in my own 1080 program late last year, and I'm starting to see the success of that. But I read about the success right across the motu in the work that Predator-Free 2050 is delivering. And it is incredible. It's stunning. It's on an oily rag, but it's in partnership with communities right across the islands and across communities, across business. The philanthropy coming in from silent donors is just, it's stunning to watch and witness. And it's all about being smart and leveraging in a way that's not been done before, and not relying entirely on government money or regional councils, city councils or unitary councils like our own. But it's successful and all the measures are being met, and there's a long way to go to get to that 2050 target. And it's an incredible challenge, but there's a vision there to take on that challenge. And my concern is that for financial reasons only, the government has walked away from this. A successful entity that has galvanised communities right across the nation. And there are great people in the Department of Conservation, but they do not have the culture at the moment. They are demoralised largely because their budgets are under massive pressure as well. Predator-Free 2050 rose above all that and kept the momentum through some tough times, and they would have if government had have stuck with it. The research projects are second to none, and they are world-leading projects. And I think we're going backwards really fast with the disestablishment of this entity. Chair, you and I know some of the people, Ed Chignall, Abby Reynolds, that have led that organisation. We know they both, as chief executives of Predator Free 2050, went well beyond the call of the hours that a chief executive puts in. They run on a skinny staff, I think it might be 15 or 20. What they do is they galvanise thousands of New Zealanders to join in on the crusade to be predator-free in 2050. Thousands of them across towns and villages and coastal communities and big cities. And I think this is an absolute travesty, and we should be submitting strongly and submitting to the Minister when he sees us next week, next Thursday at this time, that this is not the direction this Auckland wants to take. We want to back the successful entities like Predator Free 2050, the company, and the vision. And so my strong submission is that we all come together and we empower our staff to make an even more powerful submission in favour of Predator Free 2050 Limited. And if it's not listened to by the government, well, they've disestablished it without reviewing the strategy. It's about face. Let's do our job to get it back up again in some new guise. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers? Oh, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just expand on my earlier comments during the question time. I think we have to be mindful of the law of unintended consequences. And that happens at an operational level, and it also seems to be happening at a strategic level. The Auckland region is a maritime region, and when it comes to conservation, natural heritage, islands are very important. And I guess, like the Marlborough Sounds, in terms of wildlife, the Hauraki Gulf is, parts of it at least, or some of the islands are of world importance, notably Hauturu, Little Barrier Island. Anyway, what I'm concerned about here is in responding to the government's change, we need to take a considered, constructive approach. Obviously, we're not going to change the government's mind, and in terms of the predator-free vision, I think everyone absolutely supports it. But so unintended consequences, a lot of projects are focusing on certain species. On Waiheke, they focus on mustelids. Other people focus on cats. Not seemingly aware that the main prey of cats, feral cats, mustelids, is actually probably the most deadly or ubiquitous predator of the lot, rats. And so I think we need to be mindful of that. If you take out one species from a suite of predators, you could actually do more harm rather than taking an integrated approach. And you see this also at a strategic level. Prior to Predator Free 2050, a whole series of islands were made predator free in the 90s and even in the early 2000s. I can think just in this century alone, Rakino was cleared of Noi rats by the ARC, Hauturu cleared of Kiori by DOC, Rangitoto, Motutapu, in 2009, I think DOC removed 8 species, predators and pests, and so on. Rakatu, more recently. but that was a project that was established prior to Predator-Free 2050. I can't think of one total eradication after 2050, Predator-Free 2050 was established, and that could be that establishing corporate type groups to manage this project without any oversight or audit could actually slow things down, because if you're getting paid and it's a source of employment, there could be a tendency to keep the job going as long as possible. And I think, I'm not sure that has happened, but the facts are there. Progress seems to have slowed down a bit. There are a lot of people participating, coming away feeling good, but culling is not killing, and control is not eradication. And therefore, I think here is an opportunity for the council, with its own expertise, to work with DOC to try and make this work better, more effectively. If the company has been nationalised by the Tories, it may be an opportunity for this council, as a public entity, to work with colleagues in DOC to make this project actually work better than it has been working for the last 10 years. I'm not criticising the people involved. There are good people involved, but in terms of the deadline of 2050, 10 years has gone by. I think we need to make a lot better progress than we have been, and this should be seen as an opportunity for constructive engagement with the government.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. And just back to the refresh itself, I think obviously we support the focus areas, mobilise for action, maintaining the gains, innovating for eradication, and preparing to accelerate. I think they're all very good directions to take, and we obviously support them in our own work. And I will just say, because I've heard a bit of criticism of the NETA of late, but if you look back at our natural environment targeted rate report from last year, we are in 1 year over 52,000 hectares of possum-based control. We've got 649 low-incident pest plant infestations. We've got 2,800 hectares of pest plant control. You've got, the list goes on and on, right across our islands, right across all our reserves. We've got hundreds of thousands of dollars going to community groups, mana whenua groups, to increase the focus. Obviously, the 1080 campaigns. You've got big increases of biodiversity, lizards, birds, everything popping up all around our urban areas, not just our reserves and sanctuaries. It's pretty phenomenal. And on the North Shore, this year we've had a flock of keriru, about 18, 20 of them, right in Birkenhead, which I saw with my own eyes, which I've never seen before in my life. We've got kaka last week in Birkenhead, Beach Haven and Takarunga in Devonport. And then, of course, the experiences we've had recently with the kiwi on Waiheke, the hihi Shakespeare, I think on Tiritiri, 277 chicks born, which is just sort of outrageous. We're running out of room for them. And then you go down through Hunua, and the great successes with the kōkako program over a long time have meant that other sanctuaries around the country will be receiving kōkako, who will then help those other sanctuaries around the country do, as Chris Darby says, that the significant work across New Zealand. So we do need to strengthen our submission to ensure that we are including the biodiversity of the whole of the country, not just Auckland, but I think the Auckland focus is good. But my concern is, as we've all said here today, the refresh does not connect with what's happening with the funding. The DOC team, I sat on the boat on the ferry with them to Waiheke, and I know a number of them. $5 million they're having to save already this from the last budget, which has meant significant reduction in staff and future staff. And then you've got this 2050, which I think surprised everyone, being reduced. And sadly, this is another thing that seems to be taking a political left and right spin, whereas this was set up by John Key's government. This was a clear economic, environmental, social, positive thing for the country and the city. that is going to be languishing. With the Jobs for Nature funding coming to an end, I have real concerns about the gains that we've made as a city and as a country. So it is a bit about face. It does not make sense to me that you would start to reduce these types of funding and reduce the ability to actually do what everyone in the city wants, I think, more focus on environment. It does not need to be a political issue. Right, so all those in favour? Any opposed? No, thank you. Right, move to item 13. I'll move. Second, Councillor Sayers. All those in favour? Item 14, summary. Oh, I didn't do 12. Apologies, I went straight to the wrong page. Sorry, Robert and Catherine, sitting there patiently.